Never go to Ravenshade Farm, Helena. Promise me. The words, laced with an unusual strain, were one of the very few demands my husband, Lawrence, had ever made in our 28 years together. I always honored his wish, even as a creeping curiosity gnawed at me in the rare moments he spoke of his childhood in Scotland, on the land he had quietly left behind. But now, Lawrence was gone, taken by a sudden, massive heart attack, an end that no one, least of all me, had foreseen. After nearly 3 decades of marriage, I was a widow at 54, left with a heartbroken, resentful daughter, and a chasm in my chest where certainty used to reside. Mrs. Whitmore, the voice of Mr. Alden, Lawrence's personal solicitor, pulled me from my thoughts. We sat in his old-world, oak-paneled office in York 2 weeks after the funeral, when the finality of death was reduced to files and signatures. There is one remaining asset. If you're watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Mr. Alden slid a cedarwood box across the mahogany desk. Inside lay an antique silver key, attached to a swallow-shaped fob, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Lawrence's familiar, neat hand. "What is this?" I asked, turning the cold key in my palm. "Your husband acquired a property in Inverness-shire, Scotland, 3 years ago. Per his instructions, you were only to be informed of its existence after his passing." Mr. Alden adjusted his glasses. "The ownership deeds have been transferred to your name. All taxes are prepaid for the next 7 years. A property in Scotland?" I struggled to process the information. Lawrence had never owned anything but our home in Yorkshire. "It is called Ravenshade Farm." "Apparently it's where he grew up. Records show it changed hands a few times before he quietly bought it back." The farm, the place he forbade me to visit, the place whose very mention could make his face, usually gentle and composed, turn as hard as stone. "Mrs. Whitmore, there is one other thing you should know." Mr. Alden lowered his voice. "This property has recently become quite valuable. There have been numerous inquiries regarding its purchase." "Valuable? It's just a farm." "Yes, but according to my sources, significant oil deposits were discovered in the region about 18 months ago. Lawrence declined all offers from the energy conglomerates." My head spun with questions. Lawrence never spoke of oil, money, or property acquisition. We lived comfortably on his salary as a petroleum engineer in Aberdeen and my modest income as an art history teacher in Yorkshire, but we were never wealthy. How could he afford a whole estate? And why keep it from me? I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dearest Helena, if you are reading this, I have left you far too soon. I am sorry. There are so many things I should have told you, but I lacked the courage. The farm is yours now. I have spent the last 3 years turning it from the ruin of my childhood into a place worthy of you. I know I made you promise never to go there. I now release you from that promise. In fact, I beg you to visit Ravenshade, just once, before you decide what to do with it. On the desk in the main house, there is a tablet. The password is the day we met, followed by your maiden name. It is crucial that you only open this alone, Helena. I love you, Helena, more than you could ever know. Lawrence." I clutched the letter to my chest, my vision blurred by tears. Even from beyond, Lawrence knew how to stun me. "I need to see this place," I finally managed. "Of course." Mr. Alden nodded slowly, his tone somber. "But I must warn you, Lawrence's family in Scotland is contesting the will. His older brother, Reginald, claims he lacked the mental capacity when he reacquired the family estate. That's absurd. Lawrence was the most clear-headed, composed man I ever knew. Nevertheless, they have filed a legal objection. With the newly discovered oil value, things could become complicated. I slipped the silver key into my jacket pocket, a strange resolve hardening in my chest. I'm going to Scotland, Mr. Alden, today. 48 hours later, after frantic flights and a long drive through the winding Inverness-shire countryside, I found myself standing before a majestic iron gate with the words Ravenshade Farm forged in antique iron. Behind it stretched an estate far grander than I had imagined. Rolling, mist-covered hills, ancient sycamore trees turning gold in the late-day sun, interspersed with thickets of ancient pine. In the distance, the 2-story manor house stood with its stone outbuildings, all exquisitely restored. This was no derelict farm. This was a reborn estate, quiet and formidable. The key turned smoothly in the gate's lock. As I drove slowly up the winding gravel path toward the main house, my heart pounded, a mix of excitement and dread. What secrets had Lawrence kept here? What part of himself had he hidden from me all these years? The main house was a beautiful, ancient stone structure with a wide porch and tall sash windows that reflected the pale Highland light. There was no trace of the pain Lawrence once associated with his childhood. This place had been loved, revived, and remade with heart. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the door. The lock gave a solid thunk, the door swung open, and I stepped across the threshold into my husband's secret world. What I saw inside made me gasp, my knees going weak, forcing me to grip the doorframe for balance. The entrance opened into a high-ceilinged grand hall with exposed oak beams and a gray granite fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that took my breath away. It was the dogs. Not actual dogs, but everywhere I looked, I saw majestic Scottish deerhounds, oil paintings depicting their stately poise, handcrafted porcelain figurines capturing their graceful movement, and blue leather-framed black and white photographs showcasing their loyalty and pride. My lifelong passion, ceramic art, the love Lawrence had always quietly supported but never fully understood, now surrounded me like a moving private gallery, a reflection of my very soul. And there, on an antique oak writing desk by the window overlooking the misty hills, sat a silver tablet, topped with a dried sprig of lavender whose familiar scent brought a lump to my throat. Before I could take another step, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside broke the silence. Through the window, I saw a black SUV pull up behind my rental car. 3 men stepped out, all bearing the unmistakable features of the Whitmore lineage: tall stature, prematurely graying hair, sharp jaws, and cold eyes. The Whitmore brothers had arrived, and by their taut expressions, I knew they weren't here to welcome the widow. The men advanced toward the manor house with the confident stride of people who believed the place already belonged to them. I quickly closed and locked the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through a narrow side window, I watched them pause on the stone steps, exchanging brief, sharp words before the eldest, a grayer, colder, harder-eyed version of Lawrence, rapped sharply on the door. "Mrs. Whitmore, we know you're in there. We should talk." His voice held that familiar Scottish lilt, identical to the deep cadence of Lawrence's when he was tired or sad. I backed away from the door, holding my breath. Lawrence's warnings about his family had always been vague but firm. Now, faced with their sudden arrival, My instinct screamed caution. The knock came again, more insistent. "Helena, I'm Reginald Whitmore, Lawrence's older brother. This is Alan and David. We've come to discuss Ravenshade." Of course, they weren't here for Lawrence, nor to comfort the widow of 28 years. They were here for the now priceless real estate. I glanced at the silver tablet on the desk. I trusted all the answers I needed were there, not in the words of the men outside. Ignoring the increasingly urgent rapping, I moved to the desk, opened the tablet, and typed the password, HW93. Helena's maiden name, day, month, year, Whitmore. The screen lit up, revealing a folder titled, For Helena. Inside were hundreds of video files, each labeled by the date, starting from 2 weeks ago, just after the funeral, and stretching out over the course of a future year. With shaking hands, I tapped the first file. Lawrence's face filled the screen. Not the frail, pale version of the last months, but a healthy, vibrant image, clearly recorded much earlier. He smiled at the camera, that familiar crooked grin that made my heart clench. "Hello, Helena. If you're seeing this, I'm gone. And you've made it to Ravenshade, despite the promise I once forced you to keep." He chuckled softly. "I should have known you wouldn't be able to resist, especially after Alden told you everything." A lump rose in my throat. Even now, he understood me so well. "I made a video for every single day of your first year without me. A year where I will walk you through your grief. A year where I will explain all the things I should have said while I was still alive." He paused, then looked straight into the camera, his gaze steady. "I'll start with why I bought back Ravenshade, the one place I swore I'd never return to." Outside, the knocking had stopped. Peeking through the curtains, I saw the 3 men retreating toward their vehicle, pulling out documents, discussing something with the tight-lipped urgency of men who were losing control. Lawrence continued. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with hereditary hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the same condition that took my father. The doctors gave me between 2 and 5 years. I chose not to tell you or Clara. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our last years to be shadowed by death. His eyes softened. I wanted to live fully with you, not slowly die under your worried gaze. A surge of shock and anger coursed through me. He had hidden a diagnosis, made my medical decisions for me, robbing me of the chance to prepare, to cherish every last moment. "I know you're angry," he said, as if reading my mind. "And you have every right to be. But I hope you'll understand. I did it out of love, not betrayal." Outside, the Whitmores paced the gravel drive, making phone calls, their sharp voices conveying the frantic energy of men who had just lost the element of control. Lawrence went on. "When I knew my time was limited, I vowed to spend it building something meaningful for you. You always loved ceramics, always talked about having a place one day to create, to revive inert earth into art." I looked around the room, choking back a sob, at the deerhound ceramics and the oil paintings of the Highlands. Every detail here was Lawrence's silent language of love. So, I went back to the very last place anyone expected, Ravenshade Farm, the place I fled at 18, swearing I'd never return. Lawrence leaned slightly toward the lens, his voice a low, confiding murmur. "What Reginald and my brothers don't know is that I legally bought Ravenshade from our father just before he died. He had squandered his fortune on years of bad investments and hopeless projects, with whiskey as his only companion. He sold Ravenshade to me for a fraction of its true value, desperate for cash, and made me swear to keep it a secret, especially from Reginald, Alan, and David, who still believed they would one day inherit it. I nodded faintly. It was starting to make sense. They believed they had a claim, while Lawrence held the rightful deed. The farm was a wreck when I came back to it, Helena, a forgotten memory of a painful childhood. But this time, I had the resources to turn it into something else, a real home. Every business trip over the past 3 years, I came back here, supervising the restoration of every stone, every window, rebuilding it all with my hands and my heart to create a space of light, art, and memory just for you. I heard faint footsteps and voices from outside. The Whitmores were returning to the front door. This time, Reginald was holding up a document pressed against a glass frame, a Scottish court order with a fresh red seal. "They're coming to claim it," Lawrence continued, his features hardening. "They never wanted Ravenshade until last year, when the massive oil discovery was made in the area. Suddenly, the land they mocked became a gold mine in their eyes. They won't hesitate to use law, money, or even blood ties to take it from you." I glanced out the window. Reginald was on the phone, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "In the bottom drawer of that desk, you'll find the blue leather briefcase containing all the legal paperwork. Ravenshade is completely yours, Helena. I ensured every seal, every signature was secure." His eyes softened. "But Helena, whether you keep it or sell it is your decision. I built it for you, adorned it with beauty, with the things you love most. I only ask that it never becomes a burden." Suddenly, I heard the sound of an engine in the distance. A Police Scotland patrol car was slowly approaching the gravel drive. The 3 Whitmore siblings exchanged glances, a mix of calculation and relief. "One last thing," Lawrence whispered, a quiet farewell. "In the Ravenshade stables, you'll find 5 Scottish deerhounds, just like the ones you sketched in your first ceramic designs. Graham will look after them, whether you're here or not. They are my last gift to you, and the freedom to choose your path." The screen went dark, freezing on Lawrence's gentle smile and warm eyes. Outside, the knock came again, this time decisive, authoritative. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Police Scotland. Please open the door." I took a deep breath, closed the tablet, opened the drawer, and retrieved the blue leather briefcase. My grip tightened on the handle, my heart pounding a fierce rhythm. Just then, my phone rang. Clara. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about Ravenshade and the oil? Reginald just called, offering me a cooperation deal in exchange for a fair settlement. What is going on, Mom?" I froze. They had contacted my daughter. A rush of primal protective instinct flared through me. "I'll explain later," I said quickly, my eyes on the police officer stepping out of his car. "But Clara, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. These people are not our friends." "Mom, if there's money—" "This isn't about money, Clara. This is your father's last wish. Trust me, just this once." A moment of silence, then a sigh of reluctant compliance. "All right, but you have to call me back as soon as you can." I nodded, hung up, and turned the doorknob. On the stone porch, a young Police Scotland constable stood between the 3 Whitmore siblings, their faces a mixture of smugness, disdain, and hostility. "Mrs. Whitmore," the constable said, his voice a calm baritone, "I'm Officer Fraser. These ladies and gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of Ravenshade in light of the ongoing inheritance dispute." I stood tall, my gaze steady. The storm had truly begun. I smiled calmly, the kind of smile Lawrence once said held the power to reassure him most. Of course, officer. But first, I believe you should see this. I presented the blue leather briefcase Lawrence had prepared. My husband anticipated this exact situation. Reginald, the eldest brother, stepped forward, his voice laced with patronizing contempt. Family estate disputes are always complex, officer. My sister-in-law is perhaps emotional and somewhat confused. It's understandable. I gently interrupted, my voice level and steady as stone. I am neither emotional nor confused. I am a widow standing on land that is legally mine, facing 3 individuals who claim kinship only by sharing DNA with my late husband. I would appreciate it if you would thoroughly review these documents before allowing anyone to step inside Ravenshade. The officer accepted the briefcase, his face neutral as he began to examine the files. The 3 Whitmore siblings exchanged quick glances. Their customary confidence began to crack. I thought of the video Lawrence left behind, the secrets he kept to shield Clara and me from unnecessary pain, the final gift of love he spent his last years perfecting. Whatever game they were playing, I would not lose the last tangible expression of that love without a fight. The officer looked up from the files. His expression had shifted. These papers appear to be in order, Mrs. Whitmore. The conveyance is clear, the notarizations are complete, and there are bank receipts confirming the transaction for purchase from their father. He turned to the Whitmore group. Sirs, ma'am, I see no legal basis for an inspection today. This is a matter for civil court, not the police. Reginald's face flushed crimson. This is ridiculous. That woman has no right. That woman, I cut in calmly, is Lawrence Whitmore's legal wife, and I have every right to be here. They fell silent. Then, they quietly retreated toward their vehicles, followed by the officer, who gave me a slight apologetic nod before driving off. As the gate swung shut, a strange feeling swelled within me, a sense of both loss and discovery. The man I thought I knew completely turned out to have layers I hadn't touched, some painful, some utterly brilliant. I now stood between 2 choices, returning to my old life or stepping into this secret legacy and the battles that came with it. I sighed softly, returned to the desk, and opened the tablet. The video for the next day was ready, and with it, a new piece of the man I loved, and only now truly began to understand. Outside, Reginald, Alan, and David had withdrawn, but their final glances made one thing clear. The battle for Ravenshade Farm had only just begun. I spent that night in our manor house, surrounded by the living evidence of his silent work of love. Sleep was elusive. My mind spun with the revelations, his hidden heart condition, the reborn Ravenshade, the Whitmore family's brazen ambition, and the hundreds of videos waiting to be opened. As dawn crept through the windows, I put on a woolen coat and began to truly explore Ravenshade. The manor house was a restoration masterpiece, a seamless blend of ancient farm architecture and modern amenity. Every room was a reflection of his profound understanding of me. The library was stocked with first editions of novels I had only ever dreamed of owning. The east-facing sunroom was flooded with light, perfect for morning coffee and sketching new ideas. The ceramic studio, the room he designed specifically for me, smelled of damp earth and soft golden light. I touched the potter's wheel, feeling the subtle indentation of a handprint, perhaps his attempt at an unfinished piece. A profound wave of emotion washed over me. But it was the Ravenshade stables that truly brought a lump to my throat. Just as Lawrence mentioned in the video, Inside were 5 magnificent Scottish deerhounds, their silver-gray coats gleaming in the dawn light. They raised their heads at my sight, their gentle eyes reflecting a memory of him. "Good morning, ma'am." A man's voice startled me. A man in his 60s, wearing a brown tweed jacket, emerged from the tack room, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm Graham Ellis. Helena Whitmore," I replied, extending my hand, "though I assume you already knew that." He nodded, a kind smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Mr. Whitmore spoke of you often during his visits, said you had an eye for form and light in art that he never did." I managed a soft laugh. "You knew Lawrence well." "As well as he allowed anyone to," Ellis replied. "He was here almost every month these past 3 years, personally overseeing every detail. Never delegated what he could do himself." I nodded. That was Lawrence. Meticulous, quiet, devoted. Ellis gestured toward the largest, most majestic deerhound, with intelligent eyes. "That's Midnight. Mr. Whitmore spent months finding him. Said he reminded him of that black clay statue you sculpted back when you taught in Yorkshire." I froze. That piece, Storm over the Moor, a dark, solitary ceramic dog against a stormy sky. It had been a symbol of freedom and pain, now made flesh, his ultimate gift. I had admired that breed in an Edinburgh museum 20 years prior, and Lawrence remembered. "Did he?" I hesitated, unsure how to phrase the question. "Did my husband ever mention his health condition to you?" A cloud passed over Graham Ellis's weathered face. "Not directly, ma'am, but in his last 6 months, he worked harder than ever, adding every final detail to Ravenshade, like a man racing against a clock only he could hear." The confirmation was a sharp pang to my heart, but it also explained the frantic urgency I'd sensed in Lawrence during those final months. I had thought it was just work stress, never imagining he was building all of this while knowing his time was finite. A cold Highland breeze swept through, carrying the scent of dry grass and the distant bark of the deerhounds. "His siblings were here yesterday," I said, carefully observing his reaction. Graham's face grew stern. "They've been hovering since the oil strikes were confirmed at Inverloch, suddenly very interested in Ravenshade, a place they abandoned for decades. You want the truth, ma'am?" He closed the deerhound's enclosure before continuing. "Reginald is the banker, always acted like he was doing Lawrence a favor by acknowledging his existence. Alan, the middle brother, is a shrewd solicitor, good at leveraging emotions, always talking about fairness only when it benefits him. David, the youngest, in investments, always living in Reginald's shadow, quiet but dangerous in his silence." He shook his head, his gaze distant. "They made Lawrence miserable growing up. When he chose to stay and help his father run the farm, they mocked him. When he came back to buy Ravenshade, they called him mad, until the Moorcrofts found oil on the next 2 estates. Then, the mockery turned to avarice." It all matched the fragmented stories Lawrence had told. A childhood of dismissiveness, his move to England for university, and the silence whenever his family came up. "They will be back," I murmured, more to myself. "Certainly," Graham affirmed. But Mr. Whitmore was 3 steps ahead, always. He left nothing to chance. His voice held sorrow and admiration. Back in the manor, I forced myself to eat breakfast before turning on the silver tablet for today's video. Lawrence appeared, sitting in the oak-paneled library, the soft light from the arched window falling on his shoulder. "Good morning, Helena. I hope you slept well in our new home." That familiar lopsided smile made my eyes sting. Today, I want to show you something special. The camera followed his footsteps through the flagstone hallway, stopping before a door I hadn't yet explored. This room is for you. The key is in the nightstand drawer, the antique silver one with the swallow fob. I paused the video, went to the master bedroom, and found it, cool in my hand. Following the route he filmed, I reached the end of the east wing. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened, and my breath hitched. A massive pottery studio was bathed in Scotland's northern light. Wheels, kilns, shelves overflowing with glazes, clay, and carving tools. Every detail reflected deep knowledge. On a shelf were several unfinished pieces, rough blocks of clay waiting to be shaped, symbolizing my new life. I hadn't touched clay in 20 years. After college, I put my artistic aspirations aside to teach, to support the family while Lawrence built his career as a petroleum engineer, and we raised Clara. For years, someday had been a distant dream, then a bittersweet memory of a path abandoned. I walked to the potter's wheel, running my hand lightly over the wooden surface, feeling where Lawrence's hand had rested, the stain of dried clay still visible. His voice resonated as I held the tablet. "You sacrificed so much, Helena. Ceramics was the first thing you let go of. Though you never complained, I promised myself I would give it back to you someday." I looked around, my hands trembling as I rested them on the cool wheel. Every tool, every bag of clay, every glaze color was a reminder that love doesn't just leave behind memories. It leaves the opportunity to begin again. And in that light-filled room, I realized Lawrence hadn't built this place just for me to remember him, but for me to reclaim myself. Tears blurred my vision as I looked around the studio. Professional wheels, neat shelves of glazes and tools, the north-facing windows providing stable, soft light, reflecting off blocks of raw clay waiting for new form. "There's one more thing." Lawrence's voice came from the silver tablet. "Check the cabinet beneath the window seat." I walked to the cushioned window seat, looking out over the misty east fields, where the early light caught the dewdrops on the grass. The highland wind blew softly, carrying the scent of lavender and damp earth. Beneath the seat, built into the wall, was a small cabinet I might have missed without the prompt. Pulling it open, I saw a flat cedarwood box. My trembling hands lifted the lid, and I sank to my knees in shock. My ceramic works, dozens of them, all the pieces I had created in college. Cobalt blue vases, crackle-glazed tea bowls, small Greek-style terracotta sculptures, everything I believed lost in our many moves. Lawrence had saved them, preserved them for 2 decades, waiting for the day he could give them back to me in this perfect space. On top was my graduation piece, a bust of a woman raising her head, her eyes conveying aspiration and belief. I remembered the day vividly. Lawrence had asked to keep it when I finished, saying, "You'll need to meet this woman again someday." Clipped next to it was a slip of paper in his familiar neat hand. "She's still there, Helena. The woman who sculpted form from passion and vision. I gave you the space. The rest is up to you." I clutched the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love mingled with grief. Lawrence had truly seen me, in a way I hadn't dared to see myself. In the pale northern light, fine specks of clay dust seemed to sparkle like faint starlight. The sound of cars on the gravel drive pulled me from the moment. Stepping to the window, I saw 2 vehicles approaching, the familiar black SUV of the Whitmore contingent, and behind it, a sleek, silver Mercedes. My heart sank as I recognized the second car. Clara had arrived, and by her steady walk and bright eyes, I knew they had begun their manipulation. My daughter, with her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin, was smiling and shaking hands with the aunts and uncles she had never met. All the fragile peace Lawrence had left behind seemed to dissolve in the cold mist. The battle for Ravenshade Farm was now more personal than ever. From the window, I watched Clara exchange friendly greetings, her body language open, her smile polite, as if this were a casual business meeting. At 29, she had inherited her father's logical mind and my drive, but lacked the composure that had held this family together. She was often too quick to trust, too slow to doubt, especially against smooth-talking rhetoric packaged as family. My phone vibrated. A text from Clara. "I'm here with Uncle Reginald and everyone. I need to talk to Uncle Reginald." They had known each other for less than a day, and she was already using the intimate address. I folded Lawrence's note, tucked it into my pocket, locked the studio door, and went to face the new coalition. They walked in without knocking. Clara, using her daughter's prerogative, led the way. Reginald, Alan, and David followed like three predatory shadows. "Mom!" Clara hugged me quickly, then backed away, her eyes scanning the grand hall. "This place is unbelievable. Why did Dad never tell us?" Before I could answer, Reginald stepped forward, tall and lean, his eyes sharp as mirrors. "Helena, yesterday was perhaps a rough start. We were surprised by your arrival, just as you were by ours." His voice was soft but calculated, his polite smile failing to reach his eyes. Beside him, Alan held the steady demeanor of a solicitor. David clutched a blue leather portfolio containing legal documents, the metal reflecting the light. I turned to Clara, ignoring Reginald. "I thought we agreed you wouldn't engage with them until we spoke." Clara's cheeks flushed. "They called this morning with a very reasonable offer. I thought I should at least hear them out." Her voice was firm. "Besides, they are my family." "Family you only met yesterday," I said gently. "Dad hid them from us," Clara countered, "just as he hid this whole place. Don't you think that's strange? What else did he hide?" The air in the great hall was colder than the mist outside. I looked at my daughter, seeing my younger self, impetuous, idealistic, having not yet tasted enough betrayal to understand that truth sometimes requires time. Reginald nodded slightly, his eyes full of calculation. "She has a right to ask questions, Helena. We all want transparency." I realized the fight for Ravenshade was not just happening in a courtroom, but in my daughter's very heart, where trust was being tested between kinship and the memory of a father who was no more. "Your father had a complicated relationship with his siblings," I said carefully. "He had his reasons for keeping his distance." Reginald waved a dismissive hand. "Old history. Sibling rivalry happens, especially in a family as fraught as ours. The important thing now is that we move forward, together." "Exactly," Clara chimed in, with the sincerity of someone who believes she is perfectly rational. Uncle Reginald explained it all. "This farm has been in the Whitmore family for generations. Dad bought it from Grandpa Whitmore, but it should have been shared among the siblings." I suppressed a sigh. In less than a day, they had worked on her, and she was repeating their version of the story. "And the sudden interest in this property has nothing to do with the oil discovery?" I asked gently. Alan stepped forward, opening his briefcase. The mineral rights situation is just one aspect of a complex legal picture. We have prepared a generous settlement offer that honors Lawrence's wishes while acknowledging the Whitmore family's historical claim to the property. We're prepared to be very generous, Reginald added, placing a paternal hand on Clara's shoulder. 1/3 for you, Helena, 1/3 for Clara, and 1/3 split amongst us. Everyone wins. Clara looked at me expectantly, clearly convinced by the proposition. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge estate. We could sell everything, walk away with tens of millions of pounds, and the family is still united. Your father specifically left this property to me, I said, looking directly at Reginald. Not to Clara, and not to his siblings. Due to emotional duress and misplaced sentiment, Reginald countered smoothly. Lawrence wasn't thinking clearly in his final years. A flash of genuine anger sparked in me. My husband was perfectly lucid until the day he died. Then why all the secrecy? David spoke up for the first time, his voice softer than Reginald's, but no less sharp. Why hide the purchase from his wife and daughter? Why the complicated setup with the solicitor? These are not the actions of a man thinking rationally. I thought of the videos, the restored farm, the ceramic studio, every element meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing about it suggested confusion or diminished capacity. Mom, Clara said, her voice gentler. I know this is hard. Dad left you, left both of us, and now we're discovering all these secrets. But this proposal makes financial sense. It sets us both up for life. Your father left this property to me, I repeated, and I will consider any written proposal with my own solicitor. I answered, but I will not be pressured in my own home. Reginald's mask of conciliation slipped, revealing the cold businessman underneath. This property is worth tens of millions of pounds with the mineral rights. We can resolve this amicably, or we can make things very difficult. Is that a threat? I asked with more composure than I felt. A reality check, he corrected. You are an art history teacher from Yorkshire, facing a legal battle against opponents with significantly greater resources. Lawrence may have meant well, but he put you in an untenable position. I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing, I said quietly. Now, I ask you to leave. Clara, you are welcome to stay for lunch if you wish. She looked conflicted, glancing between me and her newly found relatives. I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss. She kissed me quickly on the cheek. Please think about the offer, Mom. Please. I watched them leave, a sense of hollowness in my chest. In just 24 hours, my daughter had been pulled into the orbit of the people Lawrence had spent his life avoiding. Whatever they were telling her, it was working. I could see it in her receptive posture, her quick adoption of their narrative. Graham waited until their car had disappeared down the gravel drive before speaking. Mrs. Whitmore, there's something you should know. Something Mr. Lawrence asked me not to mention unless absolutely necessary. I turned to him, emotionally drained, but forcing myself to focus. What is it? It's about the true scope of Ravenshade and what is really hidden here. He gestured toward the Ravenshade stables. We should walk. Some things are better not discussed in the house, where walls may have ears. As I followed him across the flagstone courtyard, the morning sun broke through the silver mist clinging to the hills, illuminating the quiet splendor of Ravenshade, the legacy Lawrence had quietly built for me. Whatever revelation awaited, I was sure of one thing. My husband had anticipated this fight. He had likely even anticipated Clara's vulnerability to Reginald's smooth talk. The only question was, had he left me enough to win the battle I never knew I'd have to fight? Graham led me past the Ravenshade stables toward an old outbuilding, separate and nestled among the damp, misty grass. Unlike the gleaming, restored buildings on the estate, this one maintained its rustic appearance, deliberately worn. Mr. Lawrence was a cautious man, Graham said, pulling out a rusty iron key, also attached to a silver swallow fob. After his siblings' surprise visit last year, he became even more vigilant. They came here before? I frowned. Lawrence never mentioned it. Graham nodded. They showed up right after hearing about the oil discovery on the neighboring estates. He was here at the time, supervising the construction of your ceramics room. They didn't recognize him. He was heavily bearded during his treatment phase. The word treatment sent a sharp stab through my heart. While I was teaching my classes in Yorkshire, he was here, sick, building this sanctuary alone, fighting his illness while secretly fortifying against his own kin. What happened? He watched them from a distance, then quietly left. That night, he changed the entire structure of Ravenshade. Graham unlocked the shed door. It starts here. The door groaned open, revealing a room stacked high with hay bales, rusty tools, and peeling wood. A scene designed to deceive any casual observer. He walked to the back corner, nudging aside a few bales to reveal an expertly crafted oak trap door, tightly sealed with precise joinery. He had this installed last winter. The builders just thought it was an old grain silo entrance. He pulled the trapdoor open, revealing a staircase descending into the darkness. After you, Mrs. Whitmore. Curiosity overcame fear. I descended. At the bottom, Graham flipped a switch. Fluorescent lights flickered on, illuminating a deep, winding stone corridor beneath the earth. What is this place? Mr. Lawrence called it the Underhall. I call it genius. We walked about 50 yards down the corridor, the scent of damp earth mingling with a faint hint of cedar wood. At the end, the space opened into a massive, secure room, concrete walls lined with wood, rows of filing cabinets, and a walnut desk covered in maps, files, and blue leather folders. "Welcome to the Underhall Vault," Graham whispered, a mix of pride and emotion in his voice. Everything he compiled over 3 years, financial data, geological maps, transaction records, and evidence against Reginald, Alan, and David. I walked to the main wall, where a large, detailed survey map of Ravenshade and the surrounding estates was mounted. Dozens of red markers indicated oil deposits, accompanied by handwritten notes: depth, density, risk. I don't understand. I turned to him. Lawrence knew about the oil? Not at first. He bought Ravenshade only to revive his childhood. A gift for you. But 18 months ago, when the new field was found in Glenmore, he quietly hired his own geological team. They discovered the surprise. The largest deposit wasn't in the East Fields where everyone focused, but beneath the western moorlands, the rocky, unusable hills everyone scoffed at. I looked closely at the map. The rough, derided wasteland area of the west was brilliantly marked with red dots. The companies missed it because the geological structure was too deep, too convoluted. Lawrence had 3 independent experts verify it, all signing non-disclosure agreements. I inhaled sharply. So Ravenshade's value far exceeds all estimates. Manifold, Graham confirmed, but there's more. He pulled a thick blue leather folio from a filing cabinet, labeled and numbered W Legacy. Mr. Lawrence kept a complete record of their shady dealings: tax evasion, money laundering, fund abuse, stock insider trading. Enough to collapse both their reputations and their finances if exposed. I flipped through it. Bank statements, printed emails, sworn affidavits, clandestine contracts. Every page was meticulous, precise. Pure Lawrence. He hadn't just left a farm, he had left a legal arsenal. "Is this for protection?" I asked quietly. "And deterrence." Graham sat down beside the desk, the light casting sharp shadows on his weathered face. He knew they would return once he was gone. He wanted you to have the ultimate leverage. Every document is notarized, stored in parallel at a bank in York, and the cipher sent through Mr. Alden. I recalled Reginald's cold smile, Alan's calm voice, David's cautious eyes, and their quick recruitment of Clara. Lawrence had anticipated every move. "Not quite all," Graham said, his voice lowering. "He didn't expect them to approach Clara so soon." My heart clenched. The image of my daughter, standing beside them, her eyes full of misplaced trust, flashed in my mind. "So what do you suggest I do?" "That's up to you, Mrs. Whitmore," he replied, his tone even. "You could sell everything: Ravenshade, the drilling rights, the land, the horses, and walk away with immense wealth. But that might come at the cost of a rift with your daughter that can never be mended." He paused, his eyes serious. "Or you can fight. Based on the evidence and the law, you will likely win, but the battle will leave deep scars." I remained silent, feeling the two choices like two sharp blades. "Or," Graham continued, "you could do what Mr. Whitmore did his whole life. Be 3 steps ahead, seeing the path no one else could see." I looked up. The thought sparked an old memory. Lawrence bent over a blueprint saying, "Always think further, Lena." 3 steps. That was him. The weak, yellow light in the underhall vault illuminated the wall of files. On the desk, I noticed a silver photo frame I hadn't seen before. Lawrence at 17, tanned cheeks, a radiant smile next to a chestnut horse. "Phoenix," Graham said, noticing my gaze. His first horse, a rare ray of light in his isolated childhood. But Reginald sold him when Lawrence went to college, just to hurt him. I gripped the frame. The 5 deerhounds in the stable. They weren't just a gift. They were a statement. Lawrence had reclaimed the symbol of his stolen youth, turning it into a gift for me. I put the photo down and took a deep breath. "Does Lawrence's laptop have a connection down here?" "Yes, ma'am," Graham replied. "He installed secure networking throughout Ravenshade, even down here." "Good. I need to watch a few more videos. Then you'll help me arrange some meetings." "With whom, ma'am?" "First, with Clara. Just the 2 of us. No one else. Then, my solicitor. And finally..." I glanced at the wall of files, where every sheet seemed to glow under the lights. "The oil company representatives. I want them to hear the terms from me." Graham smiled, a rare expression amidst the gathering storm. A plan Mr. Whitmore would surely applaud. "Not just applaud," I said, my voice slow and steady. "It's the only way to honor the man who loved me by his actions, not his promises. They are pulling Clara to their side with half-truths and the allure of immense wealth, and they are exploiting her grief." Graham had said quietly. "She just lost her father. Now they offer a connection to him. Blood, history, the Whitmore name. Things that seem genuine but are tainted by calculation. For a soul in fractured grief, that's a very hard invitation to refuse." I clenched my fists. Graham was right. Clara had always been Lawrence's pride, sharp, analytical, a planner. His death had disoriented her. Now, anyone who subtly suggested, "Your father would have wanted this," would gain her trust. "What should I do now, Graham?" "You need to understand what you hold. Not just oil, not just Ravenshade, but justice and truth. Lawrence set everything up. It's up to you when to play your hand." I looked up. The thought tapped into an old memory. Lawrence, leaning over a blueprint, saying, "Always think further, Lena." Over the next 48 hours, I barely slept. I lived in the pale blue light of the screen, watching weeks of video footage in just 2 nights. Each clip was a message, a piece of wisdom he left behind. "They will use divide and conquer," Lawrence said in one video, his voice low and firm. "Reginald will be the decent one, Alan the legal mind, David the silent shadow, and they will target Clara because she is the key to your heart." In another video, he panned the camera across the western moorlands, the area where the wind constantly whistled, the trees were stunted, and the rocks were barren. "This area looks like nothing, Lena, but it holds the oil vein. People ignore the ugly, but the real value is hidden under the gravel." I took meticulous notes. Every word was a move on the chessboard. By the dawn of the 3rd day, my plan was clear. Protect Clara, secure the assets, and counterattack with Lawrence's strategy, not with anger, but with vision. That morning, I arranged to meet Clara at the Glenmere Cafe, an old stone coffee house 20 minutes from Ravenshade, neutral territory, away from the Whitmore's shadows. She arrived 15 minutes late, in a charcoal woolen cloak, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes guarded. "I can't stay long," she said, setting down her bag. "Uncle Reginald is waiting for me. We have a solicitor meeting this afternoon." "Uncle Reginald," I repeated gently. "It's only been 3 days, hasn't it?" Clara flushed slightly, then tilted her chin. "They've been very kind, which is something I haven't seen from you lately. You look at them like they're the enemy when they're Dad's family." I sipped my coffee, keeping my voice level. "Do you remember your 2nd-year art history course? What did your professor say about perspective?" Clara frowned. "About the point of view. What does that have to do with anything?" "Because perspective changes everything. Stand in a different place, and the landscape changes. You've only seen the story through their lens. Now, I want you to try seeing it through your father's eyes." "Dad is gone," she said, her voice cracking. "And clearly, he didn't trust us enough to tell us about this place." I opened my bag and took out the silver tablet. The screen lit up, showing Lawrence, that familiar lopsided smile, his eyes gentle, as if he were sitting right across the table. "Hello, Clara. If you're watching this, it means your mother brought you to the right place. I wanted to talk to you directly, not through anyone else." Clara froze, her fingers tightening around her teacup. I looked at her, my voice softening. "Sometimes, to understand the truth, you need to hear it from the person who loved you the most. Actually, he left something for both of us." "What is it?" Clara asked, her voice dry, like someone who has just swum through an emotional storm. "Your father made videos, hundreds of them," I said, opening the silver tablet. "Recordings to guide us when he was gone." Her eyes widened. "He filmed videos?" "He knew he was dying," I replied, my voice catching. "He was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy 3 years ago. But he chose to keep it secret because he wanted us to have peaceful final years, untainted by illness. Clara shook her head vehemently. No way. Dad would have told me. Watch. Hear it from him. I selected the video labeled, "For Clara, when she needs it." Lawrence's face appeared. Healthy, warm, his eyes bright beneath a kind smile. Hello, my smart girl. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry about the secrets I kept. You never did tolerate being left out, even when you were 5. Clara bit her lip, tears welling up. I should have told you, Lawrence continued. I should have given you time to ask questions, as you always do, until you get to the bottom of things. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years to be normal. No stethoscopes, no hospitals, just laughter and the sun setting over the raven-shade fields. I hope one day you'll understand. He paused, then his voice became grave. There's one more thing. About my siblings. The estrangement was not a trivial matter. My daughter, when I was 19, they embezzled my small inheritance. They used my name in fraudulent paperwork while I was at university in Edinburgh. When I threatened to expose them, they threatened to send me to prison as an accomplice. I left Scotland, changed my name from Lawrence to Lawrence, and started over in Yorkshire. I met your mother, built a life, and raised you. That was enough. He paused, his eyes gleaming with resolve. But Reginald, Alan, and David never changed. Whatever they tell you, remember, they want Ravenshade not out of kinship, but out of greed, and they will use any means, including my daughter, to get it. The video ended with his last, wrenching gaze. Clara sat motionless, tears streaming down her face, her lips trembling. He was protecting us, she whispered. All this time. It wasn't just the illness. I nodded. They are not the family they pretend to be. They are opportunists. And you, the daughter who is most like your father, are the bridge they intend to exploit. Clara wiped her tears, her voice choked. They lied to me, didn't they? About everything? Not everything, I said slowly. The farm is worth millions, that's true. But they didn't tell you about the Western Moorlands, the part they conveniently excluded from their proposal. They didn't tell you about the real oil deposit beneath that ground. A spark flashed in her eyes. They're hiding things from us. Us, I repeated, my heart swelling with hope. Does that mean you're with me? Mom, I never left. I just wanted to hear about Dad, see his pictures, hear the childhood stories. I wanted to understand him better. I reached across the table and held her hand, my voice softening. I understand. Grief makes you susceptible to those who hold out their hands. But now, we know who they are, and we have to be smarter than them. Clara took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening, her expression becoming as determined as Lawrence's used to be. So what's the plan? I smiled, a smile mixed with tears and resolve. First, tonight we meet with my solicitor, the one Alden recommended, unaffiliated with them. Then tomorrow morning, we engage with Highland Petro Energy. The oil company? Yes, because knowledge is leverage. And we hold the ultimate leverage, the map of the real oil deposit. I pulled Lawrence's blue leather folio from my bag and spread the geological surveys from the Underhall vault before her. They think I'm a naive widow, and you're a gullible niece. Now we're going to show them the truth. Clara laughed softly through her tears, the warmest sound I had heard since the funeral. Dad always said you were the smartest person he ever met. That beneath the gentle art teacher exterior was a strategist who only needed a strong enough reason to defeat anyone. He really said that? I asked, half in disbelief, half in surprise. Always. Clara nodded, her eyes shining. He also said the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Helena Whitmore. I laughed through my tears. That sounds like him. I think he'd be proud of you, Clara said, her voice shaking but firm. And I replied, am proud of you for being strong enough to look straight at the truth. We left the Glenmere Cafe in the cold wind. The flagstone pavement was damp. The smell of rain and coffee mingled. The sky was silver gray, but in my heart, I saw a light opening. The Whitmore siblings thought they had won, that they had divided us. But they had just made their biggest mistake, turning two solitary women into an unbreakable alliance. That evening, in the oak-paneled drawing room of Ravenshade, Clara sat beside me by the fireplace. As I laid out the full plan to the solicitor Lawrence had chosen, the firelight reflected on her face, and I saw my husband's eyes again. Lawrence was never truly gone. He was still here, in the strategy, in the courage, and in the love we would continue to protect. The solicitor's expression shifted from professional composure to profound admiration as he grasped the full scale of my plan. Mrs. Whitmore, he finally said, his voice low but respectful, Lawrence told me you would surprise me with your strategic foresight. He was absolutely right. I offered a small smile, my eyes distant for a moment. My husband was right about many things, especially his belief that I could not only survive this loss, but emerge stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal. The Whitmore siblings appeared at Ravenshade Estate exactly as I predicted, 10 o'clock sharp, 3 days after my private meeting with Clara. Their sleek black SUV rolled up the gravel drive, carrying the air of men for whom victory was a mere formality. Behind them was a silver Bentley I hadn't seen. Clearly their solicitor or a financial advisor. I stood by the large window, dressed in a tailored navy suit, my hair neatly pinned, wearing the pearl earrings Lawrence gave me on our 10th anniversary. Appearance is a language, and today I spoke the language of authority. They're here, I called. Clara emerged from the dining room, looking mature in a dark blue dress, her father's silver pocket watch prominently pinned to her wrist. Ready? She asked, her eyes a mix of nervousness and resolve. Completely. I squeezed her hand gently. Remember, let them talk themselves into a corner. Ellis appeared at the doorway, as composed as a butler in an old estate. The other guests have arrived via the service entrance, ma'am. I've settled them in the dining room as requested. Excellent, Ellis. I gave a slight nod. The doorbell chimed. Ellis opened the tall oak door, bowing ceremoniously. Reginald led the way, his stride radiating superiority, followed by Alan with his leather briefcase and David bringing up the rear. Trailing them was a silver-haired man in a light gray suit, carrying the air of a seasoned executive. Helena. Reginald smiled, the gesture not reaching his eyes. We appreciate you agreeing to meet today. He inclined his head toward the man with him. This is Harrison Wells, CEO of Northwind Energy. We thought it would be helpful to have an industry expert discuss Ravenshade's potential. I immediately understood. They intended to use technical jargon and market valuations to overwhelm me. An old trick. How thoughtful, I replied pleasantly. The dining room is ready for our discussion. I led them through the hall, where the morning light shone on the restored paintings. Their appraising eyes did not escape me. They were calculating the value of every item as if it already belonged to them. In the formal dining room, The long oak table was perfectly set with a dark blue runner, files at each place, a carafe of lemon water, polished silver tea service, and soft candlelight reflecting off the antique window panes. "Please, take a seat," I gestured. "We have much to discuss." When everyone was seated, I remained standing at the head of the table, commanding the space. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was quite informative." Reginald's smile broadened. He clearly mistook my words for a sign of concession. "We're pleased you considered it seriously. With Mr. Wells here, we can finalize the fair division of Ravenshade." "Division?" I echoed, my eyes calm. "Yes, that's precisely what I wanted to talk about." I picked up a remote control placed discreetly on the table. "If you'd kindly direct your attention." I pressed a button. A soft whirring sound signaled that a concealed projection screen was lowering from the ceiling. The three brothers glanced at each other, surprised. "This is a full geological survey of Ravenshade," I said, my voice measured and clear. Another click, and the screen displayed a detailed map, property boundaries, geological composition, the Western Hills marked in red, along with professional notations. Reginald narrowed his eyes. "I don't recall sharing this map." "Of course not," I smiled. "Because you've never seen it. This is an independent report commissioned by Lawrence 18 months ago. You only knew one part of the picture. I, on the other hand, I hold the complete one." I paused, letting the words sink in. Across the table, the smile faded from Reginald's face. I knew. The tables had just turned. The entire 2,200 acres of the Ravenshade estate, not just the 800 acres on the east side you so cleverly included in your proposal. I continued, my voice steady. Alan shifted in his chair, attempting to maintain his composure. The western area is mostly rough, rocky terrain, undeveloped. We excluded it to simplify the division process. How thoughtful, I returned with a slight smile, except for one small detail. I pressed the remote again, and the map on the screen was immediately overlaid with a data layer. The hidden oil. Deposits were clearly visible beneath the previously dismissed useless acreage. The geological map from Lawrence's war room flashed with red lines, evidence of the massive reserves they knew nothing about. Harrison Wells, the North Wind Energy CEO, jolted upright, his confident demeanor vanishing. He leaned forward, studying the map as if he had just discovered a buried treasure. "As you can see," I said calmly, "the main vein runs deep beneath the western section, the very land you generously offered to exclude from your fair share division." Reginald's face went crimson, his voice strained. "These surveys are unreliable. Northwind's analysis shows..." Interestingly, another voice cut in, firm but calm. A connecting door opened, and all eyes turned to the silver-haired man who walked in. Thomas Reeves, CEO of Highland Petro, Northwind's largest rival. He was accompanied by my solicitor and 2 technicians in charcoal suits. "What is the meaning of this?" Reginald nearly leaped from his seat. "I believe you forgot," I replied smoothly. "This is a meeting about the true value of Ravenshade. Mr. Reeves is here to confirm the geological data my husband left behind and to present Highland Petro's official interest." Harrison Wells glared at the 3 siblings, the betrayal obvious. "You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights to this land." "In fact, they do not," my solicitor interjected, placing a stack of files on the table. "Mrs. Whitmore is the sole legal owner, including all mineral rights. The papers you provided to Mr. Wells hold no legal standing." Reginald slammed his hand on the table. Ravenshade has belonged to the Whitmore family for generations. Lawrence had a moral obligation to share with his siblings. Moral obligation? Clara spoke up for the first time, her voice calm yet sharp. She gripped her water glass, staring straight ahead. Like the obligation you showed my father, when you forged his signature on loan documents, stole his inheritance, and then threatened to implicate him in financial fraud if he spoke up. The room fell silent. Harrison Wells frowned. What is she talking about? I think these documents will clarify, I said, nodding a signal. My solicitor distributed a sealed envelope to each person. Inside are copies of files Lawrence collected, detailing the shady transactions related to the Whitmore family assets over the past 3 decades. While the statute of limitations may have expired on some items, I believe the Scottish financial authorities will still find much of interest. Beatrice opened her envelope, scanned the documents, and went pale. David lowered his head, his forehead glistening with sweat. This is private family business, Alan stammered. It has no relevance to this negotiation. On the contrary, I replied, sitting down at the head of the table, my voice even as steel. It establishes a pattern of fraudulent behavior, from stealing their brother's inheritance to deceiving a business partner today. You didn't just manipulate family, you misled Mr. Wells. I looked directly at Harrison. You were drawn into an opaque game. Lawrence prepared all this evidence to protect Ravenshade from his own blood. The room was heavy. No one dared to breathe deeply. On the screen, the map glowed like an undeniable declaration. Oil beneath the earth, guilt on the table. Reginald finally broke the silence. What do you want? I tilted my head slightly, my voice calm. I want you to leave Ravenshade and never return. I want you to immediately cease all attempts to contest Ravenshade Farm and to stop exploiting Clara's grief over her father to manipulate her, I said, my voice level and sharp. In return, these documents will remain sealed, seen only by the people in this room. Harrison Wells, Northwind's representative, jumped to his feet, his face shifting from astonishment to cold fury. Mrs. Whitmore, he stated stiffly, my company entered this based on information that was clearly incomplete and deliberately distorted. I will withdraw from this negotiation immediately and contact you directly for any future discussions. He nodded stiffly, casting a contemptuous look at the 3 Whitmore siblings before leaving the room, the door closing with a tense thud. Reginald gritted his teeth, trying to reclaim some authority. You don't know what you're doing, Helena. The western area is all granite and desolate moorland. The cost of extraction will kill any project. Actually, Thomas Reeves of Highland Petro spoke up, calm and confident. We have just finalized the DrillFlex deep core technology, specifically designed for the type of rock structure in the western moorlands. My company is prepared to present a formal offer that truly reflects the area's potential and challenges. The meeting, which they had prepared as a session to seize the property, had turned into a declaration of counterattack. I caught Clara's eye, my daughter who had been briefly swayed, now standing firmly by my side. Her gaze was one of quiet pride, mixed with a hint of tears as if sending the message, Dad was right, Mom. I gently squeezed the hand I placed on the table, inwardly telling Lawrence, You see? Every move you made worked. 2 hours later, as Reginald, Alan, and David quietly withdrew, defeated and bound by the settlement document prepared by Lawrence's solicitor, I knew Ravenshade was officially secured, not divided, not sold off, but a living legacy where Clara and I would continue what Lawrence started. From the large window, I watched their cars drive down the path, winding around the century-old oak trees, disappearing behind the silver grass hills in the fading light. Ellis approached, his rough hands clasped behind his back. "Your husband must be smiling from above," he said softly. "You defeated them with the very justice he believed in." I nodded, a strange feeling surging in my chest. Victory mixed with sorrow. Sorrow that the man I loved was gone, but strength because I had finally stood in the place he chose for me. "We're not finished yet," I replied, my gaze fixed on the old stone house in the west, where the cedarwood tablet held the hundreds of videos he left behind. Lawrence planned a long game. Now it's time to continue. This was only the first battle, and we won it, not with violence, but with intellect and loyalty. In the weeks that followed, Ravenshade Farm settled back into a familiar rhythm. Clara stayed, helping me sort through piles of papers and meet the tradesmen Lawrence had hired. Her initial anger faded, replaced by deep admiration. Every morning, when the mist still shrouded the heather fields, mother and daughter would open one of Lawrence's videos, listening to him reminisce, advise, and sometimes simply remind us, "Don't forget to watch the sunrise, because the light is the promise of a new day." One evening, sitting on the wooden porch watching the sun sink over the western moorlands, Clara asked, "Did you ever suspect about Dad's illness, or that he was planning all of this?" I pondered the question, looking at the purple light reflecting on my teacup. Yes, there were small signs I had dismissed. His insistence on rewriting the will 3 years ago, the times he would quietly watch me, as if trying to memorize every detail of my face, the urge he had to take photographs, preserving ordinary moments. I thought Dad was just appreciating life more. Clara smiled faintly. He was, but because he knew every remaining day was precious. I smiled, remembering a joke he used to make. "Someday we'll sail across Loch Linnhe. Someday I'll fix the kitchen." And then, one autumn morning, he actually started doing all those things, like a man racing against time. "Like buying Ravenshade," Clara continued, "and turning it into the place he always dreamed of, both a home and a testament to his love." I nodded. Yes, I once thought it was for financial security, but now I understand. He did it to leave behind a world that was intact, where we could stand firm, even without him. I shook my head slightly, still struggling to accept the depth of Lawrence's quiet arrangements. I never imagined he was in a race against time, that every stone, every plan, every blueprint was an effort to build a legacy, because he knew he wouldn't be here to see it flourish. Highland Petro's representatives were genuinely astonished when I presented the preconditions for their access to the oil deep beneath the Ravenshade estate. Instead of selling off the drilling rights for cash, as most landowners in the region did, I insisted on a structured long-term agreement, emphasizing environmental protection, sustainable extraction, and the establishment of a trust fund to restore the ecosystem after the oil reserves were depleted. Mrs. Whitmore, their chief negotiator, exclaimed, "These terms are highly unusual in the industry." "Then perhaps the industry needs more unusual," I replied, a quiet steel echoing Lawrence's own resolve. "The oil has been underground for millions of years. It can stay there for a few more until we agree on the right way to extract it." Surprisingly, Thomas Reeves, the CEO, wasn't discouraged by my firmness. He seemed genuinely convinced. Your husband mentioned you studied environmental science before switching to literature. He nodded. He told me you would never do this just for profit, but for principle. Another piece of Lawrence's grand plan fell into place. He had clearly prepared these connections, knowing I would be the one to conduct his final symphony. A month after receiving the inheritance, I stood in the light-filled northern art studio he built. The light streamed through the tall, floor-to-ceiling window, illuminating the blank canvas before me. After more than 2 decades away from painting, I finally returned to the brush and color. Initially hesitant, the strokes soon became firmer, more confident. The subject of today's painting waited patiently in the field of soft purple heather outside, Midnight, the Frisian stallion Lawrence had bought, because he reminded him of a painting I had admired in an Edinburgh museum 20 years ago. Ellis patiently guided me in writing again. My middle-aged body protested, but gradually adapted to the ancient, steady rhythm of the Highlands. Mom, Clara appeared at the doorway, holding the cedarwood laptop that had become our treasure. Today's video is different. I think you should watch it alone. I put my brush down, intrigued. We had made a habit of watching Lawrence's legacy videos every morning, finding comfort and guidance within them. How is it different? He titled it, February 15th, When Helena Starts Painting Again, she said, smiling. He knew you'd return. Alone in the light-filled room, surrounded by easels, colors, and the familiar scent of turpentine, I opened the laptop and pressed play. Lawrence appeared, sitting in this very room when it was still empty. Hello, my love. His voice was gentle. If you're watching this, it means you've returned to the brush and color. I've thought a lot about legacy, what we leave behind. Most people think it's assets, children, or achievements. But I believe the true legacy is when we unlock the potential in the person we love. He gestured around the empty room, imagining the future. I envision you here, the northern light illuminating the canvas, holding your brush, painting the world as you once dreamed. I looked up at my unfinished painting of Midnight and realized with a start, the composition, the light, even the curve of the horse's neck matched a description he had given in a distant dream. I arranged everything to give you freedom, Lena, he said softly. Financial, stability from the oil rights, a shield against opportunists, and a worthy place for your creative soul. But what you do with that freedom, that is your legacy, not mine. He leaned closer to the camera, his smile as warm as the late Highland sun. The farm, the horses, the studio, they are not just possessions. They are tools for you to repaint the canvas of your own life. True legacy isn't possession, it's potential, the freedom to become more of who you were meant to be, unbound by circumstance. I paused the video, overwhelmed by the depth of his understanding. Lawrence had seen me, the artist hidden beneath the facade of the practical teacher, the resilient mother, long before I dared to look at myself again. When I pressed play again, his expression softened, his eyes filled with quiet love. I have one small request, he said softly. Not a demand, just a prayer. In the oak cabinet behind the studio, there is a large canvas I had specially made before my diagnosis. It's waiting. When you are truly ready, paint something on it. Something that captures not just what your eyes see, but what your heart feels about this place, Ravenshade, the land that brought me home, and is now moving you forward. The screen faded out with his familiar sign-off. Until tomorrow, my love. I sat still for a long time, listening to the wind whisper outside the large glass window. Then, On an impulse, I stood up, opened the oak cabinet behind the studio, and found the enormous canvas, wrapped in coarse Scottish linen, set in a walnut frame, exactly as he described. It was the perfect size for the large wall in the great hall, the wall Lawrence once said, "The northern light here will tell our story for us." In the weeks that followed, as autumn turned the valley gold and stained the hills purple, I sketched countless drafts trying to capture the soul of Ravenshade, not just the farm, but the journey. Every sketch was missing something. Until one morning, when I saw Clara riding midnight across the misty fields, every piece in my mind clicked into place. I began to paint, not a simple landscape, but a map of time. The foreground was the vibrant, steadfast Ravenshade of today. Beneath that layer, the ruined estate of 30 years ago. And beneath that, the primordial land, wild, silent, where Lawrence's ancestors first built their simple croft. Spanning these 3 layers of time, 2 figures rode side by side, a man and a woman, their faces blurred, representing all those who have loved, lost, and stood tall. Behind them, almost blending into the mist, was the faint figure of a young girl leading her horse toward the light, the symbol of the future, of Clara, and of every generation to follow. When the painting was dry, Ellis helped me hang it in the exact spot Lawrence had designated. Clara stood silent for a long time, tears running down her face. "Is that Dad? And you? And me?" I nodded. Past, present, future, walking this land together. "Legacy," I whispered. "Not what is left behind, but what keeps moving forward." That evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset over the Heather Hills. For the first time, I felt Lawrence was not just a memory, but an invisible companion, the one who gave me the canvas and the freedom to paint the rest of my life. He hadn't just left me financial security, he had left me the capacity for rebirth. Under our stewardship, Ravenshade would become a symbol of responsibility, art, legacy. The oil would be extracted sustainably, creating a conservation fund for future generations. And I, Helena, would continue to bring beauty into the world, with my brush, and with the quiet courage he had seen in me from the start. On the oak desk, the laptop was closed, but Lawrence's next video was waiting. Day 143, The Winter Promise. I knew that when I opened it tomorrow morning, there would be another whisper, another plan he had prepared, just as he had every day before. Winter came, blanketing the valley in shimmering snow. Frost carved intricate patterns onto the window frames, and the fireplace smoke curled into the clean highland air. I chose to stay for the entire season, to fully experience the cycle of the land, rather than leave as I had planned. Ravenshade was no longer a temporary shelter. It was home. Clara reluctantly returned to London, where her media company demanded her frequent presence. But every morning, we still met across the screen, she in her city apartment, me in the Great Hall, and Lawrence in the legacy videos. 3 people, 3 times, 3 spaces, yet sharing one uninterrupted conversation. I looked up at the large painting on the wall. The evening light reflected on the oil paint, making the 2 riders seem to move, heading toward the horizon. In that moment, I understood. Every day I lived, every stroke I painted, was the response to the love he had left behind. And Ravenshade, the place of his beginning, his end, and my rebirth, had fully become a part of me. The Western Hills are especially beautiful after a fresh snow, Lawrence's voice echoed in today's video, recorded exactly 1 year ago in this room. If Ellis is still maintaining the snowmobile in the equipment shed, you should try riding it up the ridge road overlooking the valley. The view at dawn will make you feel small in the best way. I smiled. Even in death, Lawrence continued to anticipate my every move. Just yesterday, Ellis had reminded me about the snowmobile and offered to show me the winter trails Lawrence had marked around Ravenshade. 6 months had passed since I confronted the Whitmore siblings. True to the agreement, they kept their distance, though my solicitor occasionally forwarded a few technical queries from their side, mostly regarding property lines and mineral rights, as Highland Petro Energy began exploratory drilling in the eastern section. The project moved, slowly, carefully, adhering to all the sustainable extraction terms I demanded. Unexpectedly, Thomas Reeves, the CEO, became a valuable ally. He came for business interests, but his growing respect for Lawrence's vision of balancing legacy with nature led him to support my every decision. A sudden phone call broke my thoughts. Clara's name flashed on the screen. My heart tightened. This call was outside our daily scheduled time. "Honey, what's wrong?" Her voice was tense. "Mom, I had a strange visitor. It was David." I froze. David? What did he want? Ostensibly to apologize for trying to split us up. Clara paused, but something felt off. He kept asking tangential questions, like how often I visit the farm, and if I've noticed anything unusual around Ravenshade lately. A chill ran down my spine, unrelated to the winter air. "What did you tell him?" I kept it vague, confirmed nothing. But, "Mom, I have a feeling they're planning something." The silence stretched between us, a heavy, suffocating beat. 6 months of quiet. For them, silence was never surrender, but calculation. "I'll tell Ellis to tighten security," I said quickly. "And I'll have my solicitor remind them of the signed terms. No encroachment or contact with my family." Clara hesitated again. "There's one more thing. David mentioned that Robert is gravely ill, a heart condition. Might need surgery. He tried to appeal to my sympathy, saying family should stick together in hard times." I went still. That same hereditary heart condition, the one that took Lawrence, was now invoked in their rhetoric. Was it the truth, or another psychological ploy? "You must be careful, Clara," I cautioned. "Sympathy doesn't mean trust." "I know, but I hate this feeling. Everything they say makes me doubt." "You're not alone," I whispered, looking out the snow-covered window. But as Lawrence used to say, the person who knows the next move doesn't rush. After hanging up, I stood silent for a long time. The disquiet spread through me. The Whitmore siblings never truly gave up. They retreated only to find a detour. I immediately called Ellis, relaying every detail. He responded calmly. "Rest assured, ma'am. I'll have the security team sweep the entire perimeter. The surveillance system is sound. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors in the remote areas. If they move, we'll know." I nodded faintly, a surge of gratitude filling me. Lawrence, even in death, was still protecting us with chillingly meticulous preparations. That night, instead of sleeping, I took a flashlight and walked across the snow-covered courtyard to the old shed. The wind bit at my face, but my steps were steady. Beneath the familiar wooden floor, the trap door opened to the secret vault, Lawrence's repository of strategic defenses. I descended the stone steps, the light illuminating the neat rows of files, each handwritten label a layer of foresight, contracts, mineral rights, finance, and in the far corner, a thin file with familiar, precise handwriting. If they return. My hands trembled. He knew. Even then. I opened it. Inside was a complete contingency plan, backup evidence, a letter to the solicitor, and one short note. If they come back, let the truth speak. Justice is silent, but never unprepared. I closed my eyes briefly. Down here, beneath the cold earth, I no longer felt isolated. He was still here, in every document, in every thought, in the resilience he had awakened in me. They could return. But this time, they wouldn't encounter a confused widow, but a Helena Whitmore who had fully awakened. In the file marked with Lawrence's handwriting, "If they return," was a full contingency plan. Inside, he detailed every step should the three brothers breach the agreement, draft injunctions ready to be filed, contact information for financial investigation agencies in Edinburgh and Toronto, and, most notably, a sealed envelope addressed to Robert Waverley, the original name in the Vietnamese text, Reginald's original name. A handwritten note was pinned to it. Only open when there is no other option. I held the envelope, the weight of it heavy as a final, profound secret Lawrence still kept. What had he written to the eldest brother, the man both pitiable and frightening, to consider this the last resort? I chose not to open it yet. Everything had its timing. Back in the main house, I tucked the letter into my woolen coat pocket, my mind racing through scenarios. Outside, the first snow fell softly, adding a pristine layer of white to the rose garden and the old gray slates of the roof. The next morning, as I was having breakfast in the sunroom, Ellis walked in, his expression grave. "Mrs. Whitmore, we have visitors." "Who is it?" "All three Waverley brothers, and two strangers. They are at the South Iron Gate." He paused, his voice lowering. "Robert says this is a family matter, unrelated to the property dispute." I stood up, walking to the large window overlooking the winding road between the pine trees. Two cars waited, the familiar black SUV and a more unassuming silver sedan. My stomach tightened. "What do you think they want?" "Nothing good, ma'am, but refusing them might lead to desperate action. Meeting them on our terms is safer." I nodded. "Allow them to enter the main house. Keep the security team in position, but out of sight. I want to control the narrative." As Ellis left to make arrangements, I pulled out my phone, immediately called my solicitor in Edinburgh to inform him of the surprise visit, then called Clara. "Do you want me to come?" she asked, worried. "No. This could be a trap to draw both of us here without legal support. Stay in the city, don't move." Outside, the antique iron gate creaked open, and the two cars slowly drove up the gravel path. I took a deep breath, walked to the study to retrieve an item Lawrence had instructed me to keep for serious confrontations. A Celtic silver brooch, seemingly harmless jewelry, but containing a hidden digital voice recorder. Whatever their intentions, their every word would be recorded. When the doorbell chimed, I was ready, sitting composedly in a high-backed armchair in the great hall. The brooch was pinned to my lapel, the sealed letter resting in my pocket. Ellis opened the door, bowing with the impeccable formality of a Scottish estate manager, then ushered the guests in. Robert led the way, looking paler, more haggard than before, his confident luster replaced by weariness. Alan followed, clutching his file case. David quietly trailed behind, the two strangers accompanying them, a doctor carrying a medical bag and a man in a charcoal suit carrying a briefcase, clearly a solicitor. "Helena?" Robert acknowledged me with a nod, his voice hoarse and weak. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment." "The Waverley family," I responded with a slight smile. always prefers surprise entrances. I gestured. Please sit down. Ellis, please bring coffee. They settled onto the sofa opposite me. I noted Robert's slight hand tremor, Alan's quick, anxious glances, and David's avoidance of eye contact. The air was thick with tension. As Ellis departed, Robert took a deep breath. I'll be direct. I've been diagnosed with the same condition that took Lawrence: hereditary hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. My doctor gives me 6 months without surgery, possibly longer with the right treatment. I kept my expression neutral, merely inclining my head. I'm sorry to hear that. Robert closed his eyes briefly. I haven't come here to beg for money. I've come for an opportunity. I don't want to leave this world with our family relationships broken. I want to atone for my mistakes with Lawrence and with you. A long silence ensued. I could feel the eyes of Alan and David on me. They did not fully share his sentiment, or perhaps were waiting to gauge my reaction. And the 2 men with you? I asked. Dr. Hargrove, my cardiologist, and Mr. Pearson, my solicitor, to ensure transparency. I want to rewrite my will. A portion of my estate will transfer to Clara, if you agree. I remained silent, my hand resting lightly in my pocket, where the last resort envelope lay. Lawrence must have anticipated this situation. A weakened Robert, seeking forgiveness, or setting a final trap. I didn't know yet, but this time I would listen and let the evidence speak for itself. Very well, I said, my voice measured and low. Tell me very clearly, what exactly are you asking of me, Robert? His eyes wavered, as if struggling between genuine remorse and calculation. Outside, the snow continued to fall, heavier now, like a white curtain drawn over the unspoken words. Robert motioned to the bespectacled man with the vintage leather medical bag. This is Dr. Hargrove, my cardiologist, and Mr. Pearson, my solicitor. I nodded formally. I am very sorry to hear of your health condition, but I don't see how that relates to your presence at Ravenshade today. Robert exchanged a quick glance with his brothers, then took a deep breath. I need a heart transplant, Helena. But there's a serious problem. The Waverly family carries a rare blood type and specific tissue characteristics, making it nearly impossible to find a suitable donor. A cold feeling shot down my spine. That sounds like a major challenge. But again, why does that involve me? Dr. Hargrove intervened, his voice level as if reading a report. Based on the medical records we've reviewed, your late husband, Lawrence, was a perfectly matched potential donor for Mr. Robert. And given the genetic component in the same lineage, there is a high probability that your daughter, Clara, may also be compatible. The statement hit me like a physical blow. They wanted to test Clara, to turn my daughter into a potential donation source for the very man who had tried to seize her inheritance and sow division between us. I emphasized every word clear enough for the recorder in my brooch to capture. You are proposing that my daughter undergo testing to see if she can be an organ donor for you? Alan cut in, trying to maintain a soothing tone. It's only an initial blood test, completely non-invasive. And if she's compatible? I asked, my voice cold as the Highland wind. Then, Robert replied, we hope she will consider donating a portion of her liver. It's a relatively safe procedure. The liver regenerates in a few months. I stared at them, silent for several seconds, trying to keep my heart rate steady amidst their unbelievable audacity. They had tried to manipulate, cheat, and betray us. Now they expected my daughter to sacrifice her body to save a man she barely knew, a man she had just learned to distrust. Let me be absolutely clear, I finally spoke, sharp yet composed. After everything you have done, the theft, the division, the betrayal, you come here now to ask if my daughter would willingly go under the knife to save a man she barely knows? Robert slightly bowed his head, his pale face showing a forced remorse. I understand how this might look, but we are still family, Helena. Blood binds us, whether we acknowledge it or not. Blood, I repeated slowly, tasting the word. I recalled the video clips Lawrence had left, the stories he told of a betrayed childhood, of the cruelty within the very bloodline he fled. You are right, Robert. Blood binds us, but not in the way you think. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope, Lawrence's strong, slanted handwriting prominent in the light of the fireplace. Lawrence left this for you, I said, my voice a near whisper, with the instruction that it only be delivered when truly necessary. Robert's eyes widened. A mix of recognition and fear was visible. Lawrence wrote, "To me?" I nodded. He anticipated every possibility, including this one. The silence stretched in the room, broken only by the crackling fire. Alan attempted to break the tension. It might sound harsh, but medicine is reality. In a case like Robert's, a family member is the most viable option. Then why not the two of you? I turned to Alan and David. Full siblings have a higher compatibility rate than a niece. Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat, answering for them. We have already tested them. Both are incompatible. Some unusual genetic markers. I looked directly at them, watching every eye, every muscle twitch. So, apart from my daughter, there are no other options, no other relatives, no other bloodline in the Waverly family? No one answered. The silence said everything. They had reached a dead end. I placed the envelope on the table, but kept my finger on the sealed edge. Then let's see what Lawrence has to say to you, Robert. Robert held his breath. Alan and David exchanged panicked glances. Outside, the Scottish snow continued to fall, quiet and heavy, as if the sky itself was listening to the verdict about to be pronounced in this cold room. A vague, heavy glance passed between the three brothers. David abruptly turned toward the window, feigning interest in the falling snow. No, Robert finally said, his voice husky and rough. There are no other siblings. I nodded slowly, then gently placed Lawrence's sealed envelope into his hand. I think, I said, you should read this before our conversation goes any further. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he tore the seal, his thin fingers unfolding the aged pages. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then snapped wide open. Robert's complexion visibly changed. His breathing became heavy. The bridge of his nose flared. The pages of the letter shook, reflecting the turmoil within the reader. Alan leaned forward. Robert, what does it say? Robert did not reply. His eyes were glued to the words, as if each sentence was stripping away a layer of the past. When he finally looked up, his usual pride and rigidity were gone. Only a man stunned by confronting the ghosts of his own lineage remained. How long? Have you known about this? He asked, his voice broken. I shook my head, calmly. I only know that Lawrence left it for you. He said it contained information you might need one day. I inclined my head, my gaze steady. What did he write, Robert? Robert slowly passed the letter to Alan. Alan read it, David peering over his shoulder. As their eyes scanned the lines, both their faces distorted, from curiosity to confusion, then to genuine horror. Alan let out a heavy exhale. No way. Father would have told us, Robert let out a laugh, a dry, bitter sound. Father would have told us? The very man who pitted us against each other all our lives? The one who divided, manipulated, and nurtured resentment between us, just to maintain control? I sat still, listening, feeling every layer of the family secret being peeled away. Perhaps, I suggested softly, someone should clarify. What did Lawrence write? Robert nodded slightly, his voice deep with sorrow. According to the letter, Lawrence discovered the truth while researching the hereditary heart condition. Father was not a widower. Our mother did not die in childbirth. Alan continued, his voice trembling slightly but clear, like a lawyer reading a file. She left Helena. Left him when Lawrence was a child, unable to bear the abuse and control. Father fabricated the died in childbirth story to erase her from history, to save face, and to punish her by erasing her from our memories. I took a deep breath. Every fragmented piece in Lawrence's disjointed accounts of his childhood suddenly clicked into place. But Robert wasn't finished. And that's not all. Alan turned another page, his voice strained. Lawrence verified that our father had another family in Glasgow, a relationship that began before our mother left and continued for decades afterward. He had 2 more children, a boy and a girl, now both in their 40s. I inclined my head slightly, a light of realization dawning, meaning there are 2 more people bearing the Waverley name, sharing the same blood, sharing your genetic markers. Robert nodded, his voice thick as crushed stone. Lawrence hired a detective to monitor their records every year, ensured their contact information was always current. I finished his sentence for him. In case one of you ever needed what you are asking for from my daughter today. The room fell into a stunned silence. The crackling firelight reflected on their ashen faces. The bitter irony hung heavy. They came demanding flesh and blood from a niece, while their true blood, 2 unacknowledged half-siblings, were still out there. David finally spoke, soft as the wind. Lawrence wrote that he only found out all of this after his own diagnosis. He chose to build Ravenshade for you, for Clara, because he wanted to escape the cycle of the family's lies. He said, "Let this place be an honest start, built on love, not obligation." I felt my eyes well up. The tears were not only for sadness, but for the profound validation. Even in death, Lawrence was protecting light from darkness. I stood up, slowly but steadily. "Then," I said, "you have your answer." My gaze swept across each man, Robert, Alan, David. Your 2 half-siblings are alive. They share your blood type, your genetic markers. If it is truly life you seek, Robert, that is where you should turn. Robert bowed his head, his once proud shoulders now seemingly weighed. Down. Alan sat stunned, his eyes wide as if seeing the family wall crack. David let out a soft sigh, a sound mixed with remorse and relief. I walked to the fireplace, placing my hand on the empty envelope. Lawrence has given you a second chance, but not by repeating the old mistakes. He chose light. Now it is your turn. No one responded. Only the sound of the wind from the distant hills whistled through the windows of Ravenshade, carrying the cold air, but also signaling a new chapter unfolding for them and for me. "Strangers," Robert objected weakly, his tired eyes looking at me. "We don't even know them." "And whose fault is that?" I asked, my voice level but cold as the wind from the western hills. "Your father chose to keep them in the dark, and you chose to see Lawrence as something lesser, as if his worth were measured only by his inheritance." I paused, looking squarely at the man who once dominated this room with his authority. "Now," I said softly, "you are reaping the consequences of your own choices." Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. "Forgive me, but from a medical perspective, any potential donor should be contacted as soon as possible. Mr. Waverly's condition is deteriorating rapidly." I looked at Robert, the man who once intimidated so many, now sitting forlornly like a lost child in the house his own father built. In the fading light, I saw a trace of Lawrence in him, the determined jawline, the deep-set eyes. And I knew Lawrence would never be happy to see me revel in his brother's demise. "The contact information for the two half-siblings," I asked. "Is it in the letter?" Robert nodded silently. "Then," I said, "you should start there, but not with a demand, with humility and the truth." I leaned toward them, my gaze steady. "Tell them who you are. Explain your medical situation and give them the right to choose, the right they should have had from the beginning. Just as with Clara, if you had approached her with honesty, she too would have had the right to self-determination." Alan, still clutching his file as a shield, spoke up. "And if they refuse?" "Then Clara," I replied, "will decide whether she wishes to be tested. But this time, every decision will be based on the whole truth, not half-lies." The room settled into stillness. I saw in their eyes, for the first time, a reflection of Lawrence, a belated regret, a genuine softening. Finally, Robert slowly stood up, every movement seeming to struggle against the weight of years of pretense. "Thank you," he said, gesturing to the envelope, now neatly folded, "for everything." David quietly tucked the letter into his coat pocket, his eyes briefly bewildered. Alan simply nodded, saying nothing. As Ellis showed them out, I remained seated in the great hall of Ravenshade, the fireplace glowing softly, the snow falling heavily outside the window. I thought of Lawrence, of his lonely youth, and of the two half-siblings he never had the chance to meet. He knew everything, and still chose forgiveness over retaliation. That evening, the snow fell again, light as a breath. I opened the laptop, clicked on the familiar icon, the day's video, filmed exactly 1 year ago in this very room. Lawrence's face appeared, still the same smile, the same gaze, transcending time. "Hello, my love," he began, his voice the gentle sound I thought I'd never hear again. "If I've guessed correctly, today may be the day they came to you with the medical card. They've known about my condition since I was a teenager. Father made sure they knew, but they never reached out, never offered a hand." I inhaled softly. Even accustomed to his extraordinary foresight, I still felt a shiver. "If they came," Lawrence continued, "and if you gave them the letter, then you did the right thing." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes shining in the soft darkness. "I once questioned whether I had the right to break the old secret, to expose those blood ties they might not want to touch again. But then I realized, family isn't blood." A pause. "It's a choice, and I chose you. I chose Clara. I hope, if they approach those two strangers, they too will be allowed to choose to help or not, to choose to connect or not, in freedom, without fear, without manipulation." I placed my hand on the screen, a strange sense of profound peace filling me. We had escaped the toxic legacy of the Waverly family. We had rebuilt Ravenshade, no longer a symbol of control and greed, but a sanctuary of truth, love, and freedom. Lawrence had turned his childhood prison into my temple of peace. He had transformed a painful past into a healing future. Outside the window, the snow-covered hills stretched endlessly. Beneath the earth, the oil was being extracted sustainably, just as he wished, enough to nurture, never to destroy. In the studio upstairs, my final painting was complete. 3 figures riding horses across the snowy field, past, present, and future, coexisting in the twilight. Clara will return in the spring. She said she wants to bring her children, if she ever has them, here, to ride midnight, to hear stories of her grandfather Lawrence, the man who chose love over power. And he is still here, in every stone, in every breath of Ravenshade, not as a ghost, but as a guiding light. "We won, Lawrence," I whispered, closing the laptop, "in the very way you wanted, in silence, with truth, and with kindness." And I, Helena Whitmore, had become the keeper of a legacy not born of blood or obligation, but nurtured by the purest bond of all, love freely given and deeply received. "Until tomorrow, my love," Lawrence said, as the day's video ended. I smiled, replying into the quiet space of snow-covered Ravenshade. Until tomorrow. I know that when tomorrow comes, there will be a new message from the past, and I will take one more step toward the future, a future inspired by his example, but shaped by my own strength and self-determination. Ravenshade Estate, the land once shrouded in secrecy and darkness, is now truly liberated, a symbol of love, quiet justice, and generational healing. Thank you for joining me. If this story touched your heart, please share it, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Goodbye.